Hello and welcome to Face Off. The party led by the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy, called the Republicans, has put forward a programme aimed at taking power back from the ruling Socialists in next year's presidential elections in France. But the project has divided much of the party, with key figures accusing Sarkozy of using it to launch his own personal bid to become president. It comes as the former president, Nicolas Sarkozy, has announced that he'll be stepping down as leader of the Republicans to allow him to run in the party's primaries, which are scheduled for this November. To discuss this, I'm joined by our two regular panellists, Jean-Marc Gonin, a senior writer with Le Figaro magazine in Paris, and Stéphane de Vries, the Paris correspondent for the Dutch television channel RTL4. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, back in 2012, Nicolas Sarkozy lost the presidential election to his socialist rival François Hollande. Less than a year away from the next election, Hollande is at an all-time low in the opinion polls, and Sarkozy is more than keen to return to the Élysée Palace for a second term in office. But as Andrew Hilliard reports, this is not working out to be quite as straightforward as Sarkozy would have liked.
A programme to win back power for Nicolas Sarkozy's Republicans in 2017. Much to his pleasure, the party headed by the former French president passed the proposal.
A political party must have a project, a collective programme that everyone can commit to.
The only problem is that not everyone's on board. Party heavyweights François Fillon and Hervé Mareton voted against the project. Many in the party say the plan has been tailored to suit Sarkozy's presidential ambitions. Key figures like Bruno Le Maire were nowhere to be seen. Alain Juppé was one of those who did turn up, but not for long.
I won't take part in the votes because there needs to be a clear difference between Sarkozy as head of the party and Sarkozy as presidential candidate.
Juppé then told reporters that he was going to watch Germany take on Italy in Bordeaux.
It's much easier to hang about on the pavement talking to journalists than it is to be here, with your fellow politicians sharing ideas.
Sarkozy told party members that Saturday's meeting would be the last with him as head of the party, though he still hasn't declared his candidacy for the presidency.
Well, back in 2007, when he last ran for president, Nicolas Sarkozy was the only candidate, and he received the overwhelming backing of his party colleagues. So I'm going to start with you, Jean-Marc Gonin. Why this time round is it different, and why isn't everybody backing Sarkozy in his second bid to become president?
Because precisely he's been 5 years in office, and he has left a legacy that is not positive even for the members of his own party. So it's more difficult for two reasons. Some of them disapproved of what he's been doing during his 5 years term. And the other ones think, it is a political party after all, that he's not the best horse to win the race. So altogether, this means that he has a stronger position in his own party, and it won't be a piece of cake or a picnic to win this primary for him.
OK, well, the main challenger is Alain Juppé, the former Prime Minister under Jacques Chirac. He's the front runner in the race now, but it appears that the gap is closing between he and Sarkozy. Why do you think that gap is actually beginning to close, even though Juppé has been the favourite to win the primary for quite some time now?
Well, I think it would be interesting to see who pays the polls, actually, because it's not really clear whether Sarkozy... Sarkozy has a track record of asking for polls, paying for polls when he was a president. It's one of the many affairs he's involved in. So I wonder who paid the polls this time. Everybody said already about Alain Juppé a couple of months ago that he was too successful too early. But I think it's very hard to say, because we're now 10 months before the presidential election. 10 months is a very long time in politics. And I think it's also part of Sarkozy's communication strategy to show that he is a real leader. We just saw in the report that he was basically blaming Alain Juppé for not being in the room and just talking to journalists. So there's a real fight, animosity between those two men. But still, Alain Juppé is still leading in the polls. So I think it's part of a communication strategy.
if, as you say, the polls are very important to Nicolas Sarkozy, who's known to have paid for them while he was in office, they're not making very good reading at the moment, are they? Because if you look at the polls and what most French people want, the majority don't want Nicolas Sarkozy to come back to be president for a second term. So you think he's losing this fight before he's even really gone into it?
We shouldn't be call it too early, just as Stefan said. If you look at precisely the polls, and the last polls, Sarkozy is making a kind of comeback. That was not expected. He's still trailing far from Alain Juppé. We've got to be cautious with those polls because Sarkozy is a real fighter, whereas Alain Juppé has always shown some flaws in his character. Has he got the standing power to go through this race without an accident? We've got to be very cautious. And Sarkozy, if you read now his political line, he's not declared as a candidate yet, but the main topic of his candidacy, Juppé is on the economic field, but Sarkozy is clearly on the nationalistic ground. And if you see what happened in Britain last week with the Brexit, we got to be cautious. Nationalism is a winning asset right now, and Sarkozy knows that very well.
And do you think, Stéphane, that Nicolas Sarkozy is also taking advantage of the climate here in France? We've got the strikes that have been taking place. We have the terrorist attacks last year. We've had violence during protests recently. It's all the sort of topics that Nicolas Sarkozy likes to put forward as being the man who's going to stand up for French people and to put a bit of order back into the country.
Well, the thing is that in politics, politics has changed in the sense that rational arguments don't matter anymore. And Sarkozy is very good in playing the emotion. Just like Jean-Marc said, he's playing on the nationalist card, terror, fear, stuff like that. It's not based on anything, but it's just emotion. Whereas Alain Juppé, I think his problem is that he's too rational, too polite, maybe, and he
maybe a bit too distant still. Maybe not getting involved enough in the campaign and being a bit absent over the last few weeks.
But his arguments of Alain Juppé are valid. And one can doubt about the arguments about Nicolas Sarkozy, but one thing that he does well is playing emotionally, and that's what voters nowadays want. We've seen that with the Brexit. It was all about emotions. It wasn't about the facts at all. So I think, indeed, Sarkozy is a real fighter. He knows how to play the voter, and that could be in his advantage. But then again, there's a first hurdle to take, which is, of course, the primary elections within the party in November and December. And there are many candidates, and some of them are doing pretty well.
Right, OK, I'm going to put this to both of you. The person who everyone is looking at as being possibly the winner of the first round of the presidential elections, which, of course, are held over 2 different rounds. Anyone can take part in the first round. Top 2 go through to the second round, and the winner is the one who comes first. So in the first round, the opinion polls are showing that one person is likely to come first, and that is Marine Le Pen, the leader of the far-right National Front. How is she going to affect how people vote, do you think, within the Republican Party for the candidate who will obviously end up within the first round trying to challenge her? First of all, Jean-Marc.
It's very difficult to guess because the primaries are open primaries. You don't need to be a member of the party to participate in the primaries. If you limit the votes if you had limited the votes to the member of the party, Sarkozy would still have a very good chance to win it because people also calculate that he might still be the better rival against Marine Le Pen. But as you said that overall polls are favorable to Juppé. He might win those primaries and look like a better candidate against Marine.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I do, actually. It will be very hard to... imagine Sarkozy wins the primary. Then basically he has a language that is... maybe more sophisticated than Marine Le Pen's, but not very much different. So the problem is that a lot of people, as they say here, they prefer the original to the copy. So they will vote for Marine Le Pen.
But they know that if Marine Le Pen gets through to the first round of the presidential elections with Nicolas Sarkozy, for example, then Sarkozy is likely at 99% to become president of France afterwards because everyone will vote for him, whereas only a small majority of people will vote for
Absolutely,
Marine Le Pen.
But then he will become a president thanks to the voters who would have voted for the left and not mainly for the people on the right who are appalled by Marine Le Pen, because they are now so close in language that if you like Sarkozy's argument, then there's not a lot of distance to like Marine Le Pen's arguments either. So it will become very hard for Sarkozy to win voters on the right. He should win voters on the centre, and that's exactly what Alain Juppé does. But then again, Juppé risks losing the voters on the more right side of the right. So it's pretty complicated. And but it's clear that Marine Le Pen, according to the polls, will be the winner of the first round. It is also quite clear that she will not be the winner of the second round, because there will be a whole dynamics to vote against Marine Le Pen, which will profit whichever the candidate will be.
Okay, crystal ball time. Is it going to be Sarkozy or Juppé, do you think?
It's very hard to guess. I never wrote off Sarkozy. I think Juppé is really ahead and should win it, but Sarkozy will be very close.
I think Juppé, because he will profit from the fact that a lot of people who have leftist sympathies, will vote in this primary as well, even if they don't belong to this party. So he will probably win.
Okay, well, we'll, of course, give you the answer to that question in November when the primaries take place. But with that, we come to the end of this week's edition of the Face Off on France 24. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the same time, same place next week. Stay with us. More coming up here on France 24.